She left the radio station at 11:03 p.m., coiling her headphones just like always 3 blocks from home. By morning, all that remained was that same cord, wrapped too perfectly, resting on a bench beneath the rustling maples. The town prayed, searched, speculated, then moved on. But 29 years later, a forgotten reel-to-reel recording surfaces, and buried inside it is something no one was supposed to hear. The voice is calm, the whisper is wrong, and the man who kept it hidden has already begun broadcasting it again. What kind of person preserves their crime as if it were art? The autumn air nips at Marla's cheeks as she gathers her belongings in the WBLM booth. Through the glass, she watches Dale, the overnight DJ, line up tomorrow's hymn selections, another special request program from the local churches. The clock above the mixing board clicks to 11:03 p.m. "And that's our community bulletin board for tonight," she says softly into the microphone, her voice steadier than when she'd started this job 3 weeks ago. "This is Marla Cates, wishing you a peaceful evening from all of us at WBLM. Dale gives her a thumbs up as he fades in the opening notes of Amazing Grace on the turntable. Marla signs the program log with careful penmanship, noting the temperature and weather conditions as required. 50 degrees clear, skies light wind. "Sure you don't want a ride?" Dale asks, adjusting his headphones. "My shift ends at midnight, but I can run you home now if you want." Getting darker earlier these days. Marla shakes her head, already wrapping her corduroy jacket tighter. "Thanks, but the walk helps me practice. Besides, it's only 3 blocks. She loops her own headphones around her neck, the station's clunky ones she's grown oddly fond of, and steps out into the October evening. The maple trees along Seminary Square rustle overhead, their leaves beginning to turn golden in the glow of widely spaced street lamps. "Tonight's special offer from Kirkland's Hardware," she whispers to herself, working on tomorrow's ad copy as her shoes tap against the sidewalk. "Fall cleanup made easy with—" The wind catches her words, carrying them away into the darkness between the trees. Near the bandstand, a figure adjusts something on a tripod, his movements precise and unhurried. Marla's steps falter for just a moment, but she steadies herself. Probably someone from the film department working on a night shoot. They're always out here with their equipment. The transmitter's familiar hum carries across the square, a constant companion on her nightly walks. Tonight it seems to pulse with an odd rhythm, like a metronome, marking time. Or maybe that's just her heartbeat, elevated slightly as she picks up her pace. The wrought iron bench appears ahead, its scrollwork casting elaborate shadows. Marla pauses, suddenly aware of how empty the square has become. 11:20 p.m., and the usual evening stragglers have all disappeared into warm dormitories and apartments. She reaches up to adjust her headphones, then hesitates. With deliberate care, she removes them from around her neck. The cord slides through her, fingers as she begins to coil it, neat loops the way they taught her at the station, each turn precise, each layer aligned. The wind stirs the maple leaves again, but beneath it comes something else. A whisper, close enough to raise the hair on her arms. Again, don't look down. Marla's carefully ordered world dissolves into shadow and rustling leaves. The night swallows her footsteps, leaving only the metronome-like ticking that might be her. Pulse might be something else entirely, counting down in the darkness. Dale drums his fingers on the mixing board, watching the clock tick past 11:30 p.m. The hymn program continues its peaceful progression through the night. But something nags at him. New students always make him worry, especially the quiet ones like Marla. He reaches for the studio phone and dials the number she listed on her emergency contact form. The phone rings 6 times at the Victorian boarding house on East 3rd Street before clicking to silence. No answer. Dale hesitates, then hangs up. Mrs. Whitaker, the retired music teacher who runs the place, is probably just asleep. No need to wake the whole house over a responsible student who walks this route every night. Morning arrives with a crisp brightness that belies the growing unease at 802 East 3rd. Mrs. Whitaker, already concerned by Marla's empty chair at the 7 a.m. breakfast table, stands in the doorway of room 4. Everything looks perfectly ordered, almost too perfect. The twin bed with its blue and white quilt lies smooth and untouched. Marla's hymn book rests squarely in the center of her desk, aligned with the edges. No note, no packed overnight bag. No sign of the girl who methodically arranges her belongings each evening. At 8:17 a.m., Mrs. Whitaker's trembling fingers dial the campus police. She's never missed breakfast, she tells the dispatcher. Not once since she moved in 6 weeks ago, and now her first class. She'd rather be early than on time. The morning sun casts long shadows across Seminary Square as two campus officers begin their canvass. Yellow leaves skitter across the paths where students hurry to their 8 a.m. classes, carefully skirting the area where the officers work. Yeah, I remember seeing someone last night, says Tom Wheeler, the groundskeeper, leaning on his rake. Man with some kind of equipment near the bandstand. Said he was testing levels when I asked. Thought it was odd being so late and all, but we get film students out here all hours. He points toward the Victorian-style gazebo, right over there just before my shift ended at 11. Officer Sarah Chen makes careful notes while her partner, Officer Marcus Rodriguez, interviews a freshman who found something on his morning jog. The student leads them to a wrought iron bench beneath the maples. The headphones were just sitting there, the student explains, shifting from foot to foot, all coiled up neat, like someone took time to wrap them properly. Seemed weird, you know? Like who takes off their headphones and wraps them up before whatever? Rodriguez pulls on latex gloves and carefully lifts the headphones. The cord forms perfect concentric circles, each loop precisely aligned with the others. Chen uses yellow chalk to mark a circle on the ground where they lay, the bright line stark against the weathered concrete. Students gather at the decorative iron fence that borders the square, whispering and pointing as Rodriguez seals the headphones in an evidence bag. The morning grows warmer, but Chen feels a chill as she photographs the scene. Something about the deliberate placement, the methodical coiling of the cord, suggests this is more than a simple case of a student who wandered off. We need to call city police, she tells Rodriguez quietly. This just became more than a missing persons report. The afternoon sun beats down on Seminary Square as Lieutenant Sarah Maxwell of the Bloomington Police Department surveys the scene, her hands on her hips. Campus Police Chief Robert Turner stands beside her, both watching their teams work the area with growing frustration. Look, Bob, I know your people got the first call, but this isn't just another stressed student situation anymore, Maxwell says, gesturing to the meticulously documented bench area. Those headphones were staged. Someone took time to make that scene look exactly how they wanted it. Turner bristles slightly. My officers handled the initial response by the book, Sarah, but I agree. This feels different than our usual start-of-semester walkabouts. At the campus police station, Officers Chen and Rodriguez coordinate with BPD to draft missing person flyers. The debate over which photo to use takes precious minutes. The formal ID snapshot or the warmer yearbook smile. They settle on both, printing hundreds of copies on bright yellow paper. K-9 Officer Mike Brennan and his German Shepherd, Rex, work the scent. Trail from a pillowcase Mrs. Whitaker provided from Marla's bed. The dog moves purposefully from the radio station doors, following Marla's path across the square. At the bandstand, Rex circles twice, then leads them to where the square's paved walkway meets a concrete drainage channel. He's confused here, Brennan calls out, watching Rex whine and pace. The trail either goes cold or splits, could mean she was picked up in a vehicle, or he leaves the darker possibility unspoken as he eyes the drainage system. The afternoon quiet breaks with the smooth baritone of Warren Phillips, broadcasting from Wakeyam's booth across town. Friends, we're interrupting our regular programming to pray for one of our own community's daughters. Marla Cates, a bright young voice from IU's radio family, hasn't been seen since last night. Let's join together in prayer and purpose. Phillips arrives at the square by 4 p.m., his signature red pencil tucked behind his ear, helping arrange flyers in neat rows on bulletin boards. Got to keep things organized, he tells anyone who'll listen. Clear information saves lives. He carefully removes outdated notices, straightens pins, creates perfect margins around Marla's photos. Such a shame, he says to Officer Chen, who watches him adjust a flyer to perfect right angles. I've heard her voice on campus radio, such pleasant diction. We're all praying she just needed some quiet time. Dark clouds gather as the day wanes. The first heavy drops fall just as the forensics team starts documenting tire impressions near the drainage channel. Lieutenant Maxwell curses, watching the carefully gridded search area turn into a maze of puddles and wet leaves. Get tarps over those tracks, she shouts, but it's too late. The storm intensifies. Water, rushing down Seminary Square's slight grade toward the storm drains. Officers scramble to protect evidence, but the rain is relentless, transforming the crisp autumn evening into a blur of shadow and flowing water. Near the bandstand, Warren Phillips holds his umbrella over a bulletin board, meticulously adjusting the plastic sheeting someone has draped over Marla's flyers. In the growing darkness, his careful movements are barely visible as he ensures each corner lies flat. Each edge remains pristine while behind him, leaves and possible evidence swirl away into the growing torrent. Detective Mark Sullivan stands in the doorway of room 12 at the Victorian boarding house, watching the campus forensics team work. Afternoon light streams through lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across Marla's perfectly made bed. Too perfect, he thinks. "Mrs. Whitaker," he calls to the landlady, hovering nearby. "You said this isn't how she usually kept her room." The elderly woman shakes her head, wringing her hands in her apron. "No, detective. Marla was lived in, you might say. Books everywhere. Bed hastily pulled up. Not like this. These corners." She gestures at the bed's hospital-tight folds. "Someone's been tidying." Sullivan moves to the small desk where a worn hymnal sits, centered precisely on the blotter. Crime scene. Technician Amy Chen carefully opens it, photographing each position before moving anything. "Wait," Mrs. Whitaker says, stepping forward. "I cleaned this desk yesterday for the police. That book wasn't arranged like that." Chen freezes, then reaches for her camera again. Someone's been back in this room. Sullivan pulls on latex gloves and gently lifts the hymnal. An index card slips from between the pages, floating to the desk surface. The handwriting is neat, almost architectural in its precision. "You read beautifully when you don't look down." "Bag it," Sullivan orders, his voice tight. "Dust everything. The book, the card, the desk surface. Someone's been teaching her." As Chen works, Mrs. Whitaker peers at the card from a safe distance. That's not Marla's writing. She had a creative hand, loops and swirls. This looks like a teacher's writing. Down the hall, Officer Rodriguez interviews 2 film students from IU's cinema club. They spread out their equipment log and permit applications on the boarding house's dining room table. "We had 3 night shoots this month," the club president explains, running his finger down the list. "But none on the 14th. Our gear cage has been locked up tight. Here's the check-in log." Rodriguez notes the alibis, watching Sullivan descend the stairs with purposeful steps. "The room's been staged," Sullivan announces, holding up an evidence bag containing the index card. "Someone's been coaching her, then coming back to arrange things." In the bedroom, Chen methodically dusts the baseboards, revealing smudged fingerprints where someone might have steadied themselves while organizing the space. She photographs each partial, then carefully lifts them with tape. "Multiple prints here," she calls. "Tout. Some fresh, some older. And dust patterns suggest regular disturbance. Someone's been in here more than once." Sullivan watches as she bags the evidence, the card, the lifted prints, dust samples from the baseboards, and seals them in a brown manila envelope. He signs the chain of custody form, knowing these small traces might be all they have. "Log it as item 147B, he tells the evidence clerk. "Cross-reference it with the handwriting, samples we're collecting from university staff." The envelope disappears into the clerk's cart, its contents waiting to whisper their secrets whenever someone thinks to ask the right questions. The week crawls by in a blur of dead ends and diminishing leads. Detective Sullivan slumps at his desk in the Bloomington PD squad room, surrounded by stacks of interview notes and bus depot manifests. Not a single ticket purchased under Marla Cates' name at any terminal within 50 miles. Her bank account at First National sits frozen, untouched since her last withdrawal for groceries 3 days before she vanished. The statement shows a careful pattern, small, precise amounts for essentials, never splurging, not the profile of someone planning to run. "Sullivan," Officer Rodriguez calls from across the room. "Got the boyfriend's alibi confirmed. He was pulling a double shift at Detroit General that night. Hospital records and 6 witness statements back it up." Sullivan nods, crossing another possibility off his list. Through the station windows, he watches leaves skitter across the parking lot as another storm front rolls in. The radio on the dispatch desk crackles with WBLM's evening programming. That smooth-talking AM DJ is mid-broadcast on his nightly Pray for Marla hour. "Friends, Your calls mean so much. The host's voice flows like warm honey. Every tip brings us closer to finding this precious lamb. Detective Chen drops a stack of tip sheets on Sullivan's desk. 24 more calls since breakfast. Ghost sightings, psychic visions, alien abductions. She rubs her temples. The prayer hours drawing every attention seeker in 3 counties. And drowning out any legitimate leads, Sullivan mutters, eyeing the growing pile. The tripod man description proves just as frustrating. Average height and build. Neat appearance, middle-aged, dark jacket. They might as well be looking for every usher at First Methodist or half the university's maintenance staff. November storms hammer the town relentlessly. At Seminary Square, rain cascades down the saturated grounds, overwhelming the antiquated drainage system. Wet leaves and debris clog the basin grates. Posted flyers dissolve into papier-mâché, washing away down storm drains, along with any evidence they hadn't yet found. Sullivan stands at the edge of the square, watching nature erase their crime scene. Even the chalk outline around the bench where they found her headphones has long since vanished. "Sir?" Rodriguez approaches, holding a clipboard. "The volunteer coordinator wanted you to know they've finished cleaning up the bulletin boards. Said some helpful fellow came by and scraped off all the old notices. Wanted everything looking neat for Parents' Weekend." Sullivan's jaw tightens. More evidence, methodically removed under the guise of civic pride. As Thanksgiving break approaches, the campus empties. Students pack up their belongings and their whispered theories, carrying the mystery home to worried parents. The police tip line, once ringing constantly, falls silent more often. In the growing dusk, Sullivan makes one final walk through Seminary Square. The bandstand stands empty, its wooden plank still damp from the latest downpour. Fresh gaps show on every bulletin board where notices once papered the surfaces, all cleared away by unseen hands in the name of tidiness. He pauses by the wrought iron bench, now bare of crime scene tape. The case is cooling, like the November air around him. The realization settles heavily. With each passing day, each rainstorm, each helpful cleanup, they're losing their chance to find Marla Cates. No body, no weapon, no clear crime scene. Just an empty path through dying leaves, and somewhere, someone who knows exactly what happened that night. Someone counting on time and weather to wash away their sins. The years after Marla's disappearance blend together like watercolors in the rain. At WBLM in 1978, maintenance crews tear out the old olive green carpeting from the broadcast booth, replacing it with industrial gray. Fresh paint covers the walls where dozens of students had leaned while reading late-night bulletins. The room smells different now, antiseptic, new, stripped of memory. Down at the Bloomington Police Department, Detective Sullivan's meticulously assembled case file migrates from his desk to a filing cabinet, then to deeper storage, as newer cases demand attention. The manila folder grows thin with handling. Marla's black and white yearbook photo paper clipped inside, her smile unchanging while the world around it ages. At the Victorian boarding house, Mrs. Whitaker keeps renting the room. What else can she do? But the hymn book stays untouched on its shelf, gathering a thin film of dust between seasonal cleanings. Sometimes she catches herself pausing in the doorway, remembering how Marla would practice her radio. Voice in the evenings, soft and determined. The smooth-talking AM DJ who'd inserted himself into the investigation makes his own transition in 1980. "The Lord is calling me to greater service," he announces on his final broadcast, voice honeyed with purpose. His listeners send cards and casseroles, missing his gentle presence on their morning drives. Years pass. He resurfaces in suburban Indianapolis, silver-haired and dignified, building a media ministry that draws crowds with its polished presentation. His Back to the Hymns revival tours feature pristine stages and precision-drilled choirs, every note and movement measured to the beat of an unseen metronome. In promotional photos, his smile is as carefully placed as the microphones on his altars. Each October, like clockwork, the Bloomington Herald-Times runs its remembrance column. Marla's face peers out from the newsprint, eternally 19 while her parents age in the real world. They maintain their rituals, the porch light burning on her birthday, the empty chair at Christmas dinner. Some nights they sit in darkness, as if the absence of light might make absence itself more bearable. In May 1998, progress finally demands its due. WBLM's aging wiring can't handle the station's transition to digital equipment. A contractor named Mike Wheeler arrives with his toolkit and blueprints, tracing conduit paths through the station's walls. In a back hallway, he finds a storage closet that's been sealed since sometime in the 70s, its door painted shut through multiple renovations. The wood groans as Wheeler works his pry bar into the frame. With a sharp crack, the door surrenders its hold. Stale air rushes out, carrying motes of ancient dust that make him cough and wave his flashlight beam through the darkness. The beam catches something that stops his hand mid-sweep. Stacked against the wall are dozens of reel-to-reel boxes, their spines labeled in precise handwriting with street names and dates spanning 1970 to 1973. Each cardboard edge bears small notches marked in red, like some kind of filing system. Wheeler steps closer, squinting at the nearest label. His work boot scuffs against something metal in the shadows. An old tripod, its legs folded neatly together, waiting in the dark like a patient spider. The station's chief engineer, Tom Reeves, sits at his workbench under fluorescent lights, carefully threading the first reel onto the refurbished Ampex deck. His fingers, practiced from decades of handling delicate tape, move with deliberate precision. The label reads Seminary 1014 in neat block letters, each character perfectly spaced. "Ready?" he asks the two detectives standing behind him. They nod and he presses play. The tape hisses to life. At first, there's just the whisper of wind through leaves, crisp and clear despite the recording's age. Then comes a low electrical hum, a sound Reeves recognizes immediately, the distinctive drone of WBLM's old transmitter tower. He adjusts the playback speed slightly, and the sound settles into its proper pitch. "That's definitely our old rig," he says, leaning forward. "Had a slight phase variance in the oscillator that week. We logged it for maintenance, but parts were back-ordered until November." Then, emerging from beneath the ambient noise, voices become audible. A young woman's voice, Marla's, practicing ad copy with careful enunciation. "Join us this Sunday for—" Her words trail off, uncertain. A man's voice follows, gentle but insistent. Again, "Try beautifully. Don't look down." The coaching continues, patient and methodical as Marla repeats the phrase. Detective Sullivan pulls out his notepad, while his partner, Rodriguez, bags the reel's container as evidence. The box edges show precise red pencil marks, like a filing system. Sullivan counts them, 14 ticks on this one. They move to a second reel marked County Bandstand Test. The sound quality is different here, rain pattering on pavement, and beneath it, the steady click of what can only be a metronome, keeping perfect time in the darkness. "We need to get these authenticated," Rodriguez says, already reaching for his phone. "The FBI's audio forensics lab in Quantico—" "Wait." Reeves holds up a hand, rewinding the first tape. "That transmitter hum, it's like a fingerprint. Every power tube had its own signature, and we kept detailed maintenance logs. If this was really recorded when—" He disappears into the station's archive room, returning with a thick binder labeled Technical Operations 1970-1975. The pages crackle as he finds October 1972, running his finger down columns of numbers and engineer's notes. Sullivan leans in, studying the yellowed page. "So this recording can only be from that specific week?" "Those exact days," Reeves confirms. "That hum is like a timestamp. You couldn't fake it, not without knowing precisely what was wrong with our transmitter during that 1 week 26 years ago." Down in the police department's evidence basement, Rodriguez logs the reels into a fresh evidence bag alongside the old index card from Marla's hymn book. The handwriting on both shares the same precise teacherly style. A retired IU sound engineer, called in to consult, makes detailed notes about the transmitter's audio signature. His pen circles one observation with special emphasis: "Oscillator variance pattern unique to 10-12-10-16-72, confirms recording date within 96-hour window of disappearance." The tapes spin quietly in their plastic bags, their secrets finally speaking after a quarter-century of silence. In a sun-filled breakfast nook in suburban Bloomington, retired sound engineer Tom Reeves settles into his worn armchair, coffee cooling on the side table. Channel 4's Heartland Morning Show plays quietly on his television, another local interest segment about to begin. The host, bright-eyed and animated, introduces her next guest. Joining us today is Pastor Daniel Morton, formerly of WBLM Radio, here to share his exciting new project, Hymns and Horizons Sacred Soundscapes of Indiana. The camera pans to reveal a distinguished man in his 70s, silver-haired and wearing a crisp charcoal suit. His smile carries the same measured warmth that once charmed radio listeners across 3 counties. "Thank you, Sarah," Morton says, his voice still carrying that practiced resonance. These recordings capture moments of divine presence in everyday places, street corners, parks, sanctuaries, places where heaven touches earth, if we only listen carefully enough. Reeves reaches for his coffee, then freezes as Morton continues. "I'd like to share a personal favorite. Recorded near Seminary Square. We've restored it, added a gentle metronome to help listeners find their center. The studio speakers fill with a familiar soundscape, wind through maple leaves, distant traffic, and underneath it all, that distinctive electrical hum." Reeves sets down his mug so quickly it sloshes. He knows this audio. He'd analyzed its peculiar frequency patterns just 2 years ago when they found those reels in the station's storage closet. "We call this piece Seminary Rain," Morton explains, as the metronome begins its steady tick beneath the ambient sounds. "Notice how the natural world creates its own sacred rhythm." Reeves is already reaching for his phone, fingers shaking as he dials the ColdCase department's number. Detective Sullivan picks up on the 3rd ring. "You need to record the Channel 4 morning show." Reeves interrupts before Sullivan can finish his greeting. "Right now." The pastor, he's playing one of the tapes. At police headquarters, the forensics lab hums with activity as technicians prepare audio samples for comparative analysis. On one screen, the waveform of the original Seminary 1014 reel scrolls past in jagged peaks and valleys. Beside it, a digital capture of Morton's restored track displays nearly identical patterns. "Look at the carrier frequency," Reeves points out, tracing the oscillation with a trembling finger. "That same 60 Hz wobble from the faulty transmitter. You can't fabricate that pattern. It's like a fingerprint." Sullivan and Rodriguez stand behind the technicians, watching as timestamp markers align key points between the recordings. At 2 minutes and 13 seconds, both tracks capture the same subtle cough, a sound so faint it was almost lost in the ambient noise. "Run it again," Sullivan requests, leaning closer to study the matching wavelengths. While the analysis continues, Rodriguez spreads a timeline across the conference table, Morton's volunteer work at WBLM in '72, his careful organization of search materials, his transition to ministry in '80. Newspaper clippings show him at choir performances and youth revivals, always positioned near the sound equipment, always ensuring perfect posture from his performers. The lab printer whirs to life, producing side-by-side spectrograms that confirm what they're hearing. 2 recordings, separated by 28 years, carrying the same unique audio signature. The past reaching into the present through carefully preserved magnetic tape. "He kept it all this time," Sullivan says quietly, studying the perfect alignment of the waveforms, "and now he's playing it on morning television." The warrant lands on District Judge Marion's desk on a humid Tuesday morning. Her signature is barely dry when Detective Sullivan presents it at WBLM's front desk, but the station's legal team is ready. They've prepared a detailed objection citing donor privacy and ecclesiastical protection for any materials connected to Pastor Morton's ministry work. "We can't release production files without explicit permission from the content owners," the station manager explains, sliding a folder of documentation across his desk. Most of these recordings are now church property. At the megachurch's media center in Indianapolis, Morton's staff proves equally intractable. Administrative assistants cite religious freedom statutes and confidentiality agreements. The investigation hits a wall of polite deflection and carefully worded responses. "We'll focus on what's in plain view," Sullivan tells Rodriguez as they regroup. "Public performances, archived materials, anywhere his work intersects with public space." The opportunity comes sooner than expected. On a sweltering August afternoon in 2001, Pastor Morton's Sacred Sounds Revival Tour arrives at the restored Buskirk Chumley Theatre in downtown Bloomington. The 1922 venue, with its ornate plasterwork and upgraded sound system, provides the perfect backdrop for his message of musical tradition. During pre-show soundcheck, Morton stands center stage, directing microphone placement with characteristic precision. The acoustic sweet spot should be exactly... He pauses, gesturing to the space above the proscenium arch. That's when the first drop falls, rust-colored water splashing onto his crisp white shirt collar, then another, and another. "Kill the house lights," calls the stage manager. "Everyone clear the stage." Morton steps back, watching as brown stains spread across the polished hardwood. Above, decades-old sprinkler pipes weep through hairline cracks, sending tainted water seeping through the ceiling panels. "We need maintenance up here now," the house manager shouts into his radio, "and someone call the fire marshal." 2 stagehands in safety harnesses ascend to inspect the damage. The waterlogged acoustic tiles are soft to the touch. As they pull down the first panel, a cascade of discolored water follows. "Hold up," one stagehand says, directing his flashlight beam higher. "There's something..." Screwed to a support beam, almost invisible against the dark wood, sits a wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox. The water damage has caused the beam to swell, pushing the box slightly away from its mounting. "Should we grab it?" the stagehand asks. "Don't touch anything else," the house manager orders, already dialing 911. "Fire department's on their way." As firefighters arrive to assess the structural damage, an usher guides Morton to the green room, assuring him they'll resolve the technical difficulties. He settles into a chair, unaware of what's happening above. Up in the ceiling, a firefighter carefully photographs the box's position before removing it. The screws are deeply rusted, but give way with minimal force. Inside, protected by the box's tight seal, neatly coiled audio cables, a water-stained church bulletin dated October 14, 1972, and a manila envelope. The envelope contains a yellowed newspaper clipping, Marla's missing person flyer, its edges precisely trimmed. In the margin, written in fade-resistant red pencil, "Found voice, needs coaching." The house manager steps into the hallway to make another call, this time to Detective Sullivan. The recovered cache spreads across Sullivan's desk like a macabre puzzle. Each item gets its own evidence marker, photographed exactly as found. The coiled cords, their rubber still supple from decades in the sealed box, the church bulletin with its hymn list and coffee ring stains, and the envelope containing Marla's flyer, its red pencil annotation sharp against the yellowed newsprint. "Lab's prioritizing the baseboard hair sample," Rodriguez says, hanging up his phone. "They're running it through the new mitochondrial sequencing." Sullivan nods, studying the careful loops of the handwriting. "Get me the 98 volunteer interviews. Anyone who worked audio with him. The files arrive by courier within the hour." Among the statements, one name stands out: Thomas Wheeler, former student engineer, now teaching high school physics in Fort Wayne. Wheeler picks up on the second ring, the portable setup. Wheeler's voice crackles over speakerphone. "Oh yeah, Pastor." Morton was religious about his field recordings. Had this wooden metronome, real antique piece. Custom tripod too. Said it had to be perfectly level or the spirit wouldn't register. "Tell me about his technical habits," Sullivan prompts. "Obsessive about cable management. Would spend 20 minutes coiling a single XLR. Said proper loops prevented signal degradation." Wheeler pauses. "Actually, there was this thing with room tone." "Room tone?" "Yeah, he'd insist on recording empty spaces. Said you could hear divine breath in the quiet. Always wanted people to clear out, sometimes for hours. Just him and the gear." Rodriguez glances at Sullivan, pen hovering over his notepad. The coiled headphones from the bench flash in both their minds. "One more thing," Wheeler adds. "He'd notch his tape boxes with red pencil. Some kind of cataloging system. Real particular about it." The lab results arrive at 9:47 p.m. The mitochondrial sequence from the baseboard hair traces maternal lineage to 3 families in southern Indiana. Cross-referenced with church records, one branch leads directly to Morton's mother's side. Sullivan spreads the evidence photos across the conference room table as the prosecutor clicks through the door. "Walk me through it," she says, setting down her briefcase. "We've got authenticated audio placing. Him at the scene. The transmitter hum matches station logs. Physical evidence cache with date-specific materials. DNA pointing to family connection. Multiple witnesses describing consistent behavioral patterns. The metronome, the cable coiling, the red pencil marks." Sullivan taps each photo in turn. And now this whole ritual with recording empty spaces, demanding privacy for hours at a time. The prosecutor studies the timeline they've assembled. Probable cause? Multiple independent streams all flowing the same direction, Rodriguez confirms. Audio, physical, genetic, behavioral. She nods slowly, then reaches for her phone. I'll wake up Judge Marion. Get your arrest teams ready. By 11:15 p.m., unmarked units are taking position around the theater. Officers check equipment by dome lights. Flexicuffs, tactical radios, service weapons secure. Suspect still in green room. Dispatch confirms over a burst of static. Security reports no changes. Sullivan adjusts his vest, listening to the arrest script being repeated in clipped tones across the radio channel. You have the right to remain silent. The night presses close around the theater's weathered brick, broken only by distant sirens and the soft click of equipment being checked one final time. The stage door of the Buskirk Chumley Theatre creaks open at 11:42 p.m. Pastor James Morton steps out into the autumn night, car keys jingling in his manicured hands. His silver hair catches the sodium glow of the parking lot lights as he moves toward his black Lincoln, its engine already purring in the crisp air. Pastor Morton, Detective Sullivan's voice cuts through the quiet. We need you to stop right there. Morton freezes, one hand on the car door. His pleasant smile doesn't waver as uniformed officers materialize from the shadows, positioning themselves in a practiced semicircle. Is there a problem, officers? His radio-trained voice carries across the lot, smooth and resonant. James Morton, you're under arrest. Sullivan moves forward, cuffs ready. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The theater doors burst open. Parishioners spill onto the sidewalk, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Hendricks from the choir clutches her sheet music to her chest. Deacon Williams stands slack-jawed, his Back to the Hymns promotional button catching the streetlight. This must be some mistake, someone calls out. Others join in, voices rising in confused protest. Morton allows himself to be cuffed, maintaining his placid expression. Please, friends, he addresses the growing crowd. Everything will be fine. Just pray. Inside interview room B at the Bloomington Police Department, Morton sits with perfect posture, hands folded on the metal table. The clock reads 1:17 a.m. Let's talk about the recordings, Sullivan says, spreading photos of the reels across the table. My soundscapes. Morton's smile remains unchanged. They're art pieces, spiritual environments for contemplation. Rodriguez slides forward the index card from Marla's hymn book. This is your handwriting. I provided pastoral guidance to many young people. Morton adjusts his sleeve. The Lord calls us to mentor with discipline, and the metronome, a tool for maintaining order. He taps the table softly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat for worship. Across the building in the digital forensics lab, technicians work through Morton's seized laptop. Lines of code scroll as they compare audio files. Got it, tech specialist Chen announces, pointing to her screen. The seminary rain track from his CD project. Perfect match to the reel from the storage closet. Same checksum fragments, same background noise pattern. She pulls up a file history. Look at these production notes. Cleaned cough marker at 2:13. That's the exact glitch point we found in the original. Down the hall, the booking camera flashes. Morton stares straight ahead, that same measured smile still in place. The image appears on the monitor, grey background placard with booking number. It's a jarring contrast to the promotional photos still adorning billboards across town, the ones showing him bathed in soft light, hands raised in benediction. In the parking lot outside, Mrs. Hendricks stares up at one such billboard, tears tracking down her cheeks. Around her, other congregation members huddle in small groups, some praying, others shaking, their heads in disbelief. Their trusted shepherd, their voice of comfort through decades of radio waves and revival meetings, now sits in a cell while his perfectly maintained facade begins to crack under the weight of recovered data and physical evidence. The evidence room at the Monroe County Courthouse buzzes with fluorescent light as Detective Sullivan and D.A. Henderson unpack another banker's box of reels. Each tape sits in a precisely labeled sleeve. Lafayette Memorial 471, Fort Wayne Cathedral 871, Richmond First Baptist 373. Patterns undeniable, Sullivan says, arranging them chronologically. Every recording coincides with a choir program and he slides over 3 yellowed missing persons bulletins. Each town had a young woman vanish within days of being praised on his show for their angelic voices. Henderson studies the bulletins through wire-rimmed glasses. Sarah Whitman, 20, disappeared after evening rehearsal. Patricia Klein, 18, last seen leaving church choir practice. Rebecca Torres, 19, missing between Vespers and... She pauses. Jesus. They all match Marla's profile. In courtroom B, Morton's defense team argues motion after motion, their voices echoing off wood paneling. The theatre cashier was obtained illegally, lead counsel insists. Maintenance staff had no authority to access that space without... Judge Williams cuts in. The sprinkler malfunction created an emergency situation. Fire code required immediate inspection of affected areas. The box was in plain view once panels were removed for public safety. Your Honor, without that warrant, motion to suppress denied. The exigent circumstances doctrine clearly applies. Late afternoon sun slants through tall windows as Howard and Margaret Cates take the stand. They sit ramrod straight, hands clasped, speaking of their daughter in present tense. Marla budgets everything, Margaret testifies, pulling a small notebook from her purse. Bus fare, groceries, even her tithe. She marks it all down, plans ahead. Her finger traces columns of neat figures. She would never just leave. Howard describes their last phone call. She was excited about the radio job, said it was helping her confidence, reading those bulletins. He clears his throat. Said someone at the station told her she had a natural voice for it. The landlady follows, her grey hair pulled back severely. I've run that boarding house 28 years. Never seen bed corners like that. Surgical tight. Not Marla's way at all. She was neat enough, but this was... She shakes her head. Different hands did that. As day fades to dusk, jurors don headphones one by one. The cleaned audio, track plays, wind in maples, the low transmitter hum, footsteps on wet pavement. Then the whisper cuts through. Again. Some jurors close their eyes, orientating to the sound. Others stare hard at Morton, his silver hair catching the last light through courtroom windows. Don't look down, the voice continues beneath the rain. Try beautifully once more. A soft intake of breath. Marla's, then silence. Juror 4 removes her headphones slowly, sets them down. Her hand shakes slightly as she writes in her notebook. Across the gallery, Margaret Cates grips her husband's arm, eyes fixed on the man who had once been everyone's trusted voice in the dark. Dr. Sarah Chen adjusts her wire-rimmed glasses as she points to the spectrogram displayed on the courtroom monitor. This frequency pattern here, her laser pointer circles a distinctive wobble in the waveform, is unique to WBLM's transmitter during October 1972. Like a fingerprint in sound. The prosecutor steps closer. Could this pattern occur randomly? No, Dr. Chen says firmly. This specific 60 Hz oscillation resulted from a documented transformer issue that week. It's present in both the storage closet reel and the pastor's commercial release, identical down to the microsecond. She switches slides, showing overlaid waveforms. And here, at precisely 2 minutes, 13 seconds, both recordings capture the same cough artifact. The probability of 2 separate recordings having matching transmitter signatures and identical background sounds is effectively 0. From the witness stand, DNA analyst Marcus Rodriguez unfolds a complex family tree. Using modern mitochondrial sequencing, we trace the hair found behind the boarding house baseboard. The genetic markers indicate it comes from this maternal lineage. His pointer traces a branch leading to Morton's mother's family. Based on population genetics, there's a 98.7% probability the hair belongs to someone in this direct family line. Morton maintains his composure, hands folded on the defense table, but his jaw tightens as Rodriguez continues. Given the location, timing, and family connection, the statistical likelihood of this being coincidental is less than 1 in 50 million. Gerald Weber, now retired from campus maintenance, leans forward in his flannel shirt. Oh sure, I remember him helping that week. Real particular about the flyer boards, always straightening them just so. He demonstrates with his hands. Spent a lot of time around the square after dark, said he was keeping watch in prayer. The prosecutor displays a publicity photo from 1970, Morton at the radio station, coiling a microphone cable with a distinctive over-under technique. Weber nods. That's exactly how he'd fix the bulletin boards. Same careful loops, same way of tucking the edges. Defense counsel rises for cross-examination. Mr. Weber, after 30 years, isn't it possible you're conflating memories, mixing up different volunteers? No, sir, Weber says firmly. Not many folks that particular about cable coiling. Stuck in my mind because it seemed excessive, you know, like he was erasing something. The defense challenges the audio evidence next. These tapes sat in unconditioned storage for decades. Surely degradation, contamination. The digital signatures are pristine, Dr. Chen interrupts. Degradation would alter the pattern, not preserve it perfectly. As afternoon light slants through tall windows, the prosecutor approaches the jury box one final time. She holds up the index card in an evidence sleeve, its corners precise despite age. The same red pencil markings appear here as in the defendant's sermon notes from 1972, she says, placing them side by side under the document camera. The same pressure points, the same careful slant. And the words. The courtroom falls silent as she reads, "You read beautifully when you don't look down." Morton's face remains impassive, but his fingers drum once against the table's polished surface, a quiet, metronome beat. The defense attorney rises, straightening his tie. The court calls Reverend James Morton. A collective intake of breath ripples through the gallery as Morton approaches the stand. His silver hair catches the afternoon light, pastoral collar crisp against his dark suit. He moves with the measured grace of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Reverend Morton," his attorney begins, "could you explain your audio preservation work?" "Of course." Morton's voice carries the same smooth resonance that once filled radio waves. "I've always believed in capturing sacred moments, the natural symphony of God's creation, wind through leaves, rain on old buildings, the acoustic character of sacred spaces." He gestures expansively. "These recordings preserve our community's spiritual heritage and the technical equipment, the metronome, standard tools for any serious field. Recording." Morton's smile reaches his eyes with practiced warmth. "The metronome helps calibrate tape speed, ensures proper timing for hymnal accompaniment." The cross-examination begins with Assistant DA Sarah Reeves approaching the stand, a coiled XLR cable in her hands. "Reverend, you've mentioned your expertise in audio. Would you demonstrate how you typically store cables after recording?" "Certainly." Morton reaches for the cable with steady hands. "And this is a technique you've used consistently since your radio days?" "Yes. Proper cable management is essential for—" He stops mid-sentence, his fingers already weaving the familiar figure 8 pattern. Reeves places a photo on the evidence projector. Marla's headphones on the seminary square bench, arranged in identical loops. "Like this, Reverend." Morton's hands freeze. A muscle twitches in his jaw, but his voice remains level. "Many audio professionals use similar methods, yet this exact pattern appears at multiple scenes." Reeves nods to the bailiff, who wheels in an old reel-to-reel player. "Your Honor, the state presents Exhibit 147C, recovered from the Civic Theatre archives. The tape begins with empty air, then a young woman's breathing, slightly echoed. Morton's shoulders tense as the familiar click of his metronome cuts through the silence, identical to the Seminary Square recording, before the leader tape abruptly ends. "That's hardly unusual equipment," Morton protests, but his typical melodic tone has sharpened. The same metronome tempo, the same recording setup, the same careful cable coils. Reeves lets each point land. Always precise, always controlled, always erasing any trace of disorder. In closing arguments, Reeves stands before the jury. James Morton built a career on appearance, the helpful volunteer, the spiritual guide, the keeper of order. But that order wasn't sacred. It was strategic. Every straightened flyer hid a search grid. Every coiled cable masked a trail. Every cleaned recording booth erased evidence. She holds up the index card. He told Marla Cates not to look down, but that's exactly what he counted on from everyone else. Heads bowed, eyes averted, trusting his tidiness meant truth. As the jury files out, Morton sits perfectly still, hands folded on the defense table. Across the aisle, Marla's parents grip each other's fingers, their knuckles white. The late afternoon sun slants through high windows, casting stark shadows across Morton's face as he finally lowers his gaze, not in supplication but in silent calculation, measuring angles of escape against the weight of accumulated evidence. The verdict. The courthouse steps gleam under the morning sun as people file through security. News vans line the curb, their satellite dishes reaching toward a cloudless October sky. 29 years and 1 week since Marla Cates walked her last path across Seminary Square. Inside courtroom 3, the gallery benches creak with the weight of spectators. The Cates family sits in the front row, shoulders touching, their faces carved by decades of waiting. Behind them, former parishioners fill 3 rows, some clutching well-worn hymnals, others holding only their trembling hands. At 10:17 a.m., the bailiff's voice cuts through the murmur, "All rise." The jury files in, 12 faces set with the gravity of their burden. The foreman, a retired schoolteacher, holds the verdict form in steady fingers. Judge Harrison accepts the paper, reviews it with practiced neutrality, and nods. In the matter of the state of Indiana versus James Morton, on the count of felony murder predicated on abduction and confinement, we the jury find the defendant guilty. Mrs. Cates releases a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Her husband's arm tightens around her shoulders as Morton stands for the verdict, his pastoral posture finally cracking at the edges. The judge's voice continues through procedural details, but the gallery's attention has fractured. Some parishioners bow their heads in prayer, though whether for Morton or his victim isn't clear. Others stare at their former leader's back, watching decades of trust dissolve into the harsh fluorescent light. Outside, the October air carries the scent of fallen leaves as reporters thrust microphones at emerging spectators. A silver-haired woman in a choir robe jacket breaks down on camera. "He blessed my grandchildren," she whispers. How could we not see?" 3 younger church members approach the Cates family, their steps hesitant. "We're so sorry," one begins, twisting a tissue. "All those prayer vigils, and he was right there, leading them. We should have questioned." Mrs. Cates reaches for their hands. "You couldn't have known. None of us did." By mid-afternoon, the courthouse empties. In the evidence room, a young clerk continues cataloguing the remaining reels from Morton's collection. Her fingers brush an unmarked box pushed to the back of a shelf. Threading it onto the player, she adjusts the volume. Static hisses through the speakers. Then, a soft intake of breath, a girl preparing to speak. The metronome begins its measured click, steady as a heartbeat, patient as a hunter. The tape cuts off there, but its implications fill the room. This wasn't improvisation. This was rehearsal. As dusk settles over Bloomington, 2 figures approach the wrought-iron bench in Seminary Square. Mr. and Mrs. Cates move slowly, carrying a single program from the 1972 autumn choir concert. Where Marla's headphones once lay in their careful coils, they place the yellowed paper, securing it with a simple blue ribbon that ripples in the evening breeze. They don't speak. The maples whisper overhead, dropping leaves onto paths that have been walked by thousands of students since their daughter disappeared. The ribbon moves freely, untethered, marking a spot that will never again be tidied into silence.